Hello again everyone, Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about something a little bit different than what I've been doing ordinarily. It's going to be talking about, I guess you could say, the validity in astrology, and I'm going to deviate from my Taurus rising routine and get back with the house rulers shortly after this segment. But what I want to talk about is first on explain to people, meaning, astrology has been around, according to Wikipedia, at least since the second millennium BCE, which is obviously a pretty long time. Now, astrology deals with, I guess you could say, connection or correlation between the movements and placements of celestial bodies and its impact on human behavior and events. Now, some people, have a misconception about, science in general. Science, based on theories, but science deals with a lot of factual information and what we can actually see. Now, if an astronaut takes his helmet off in space, he can't breathe. We know that. If I'm to I drop this pen, what do you know? I know it's going to fall down. I know anything I hold in my hand is going to fall down once I release it. That's based on observations. Now, astrology is perceived by many, well, it's not really perceived, I guess you could say it's classified as a pseudoscience, which is basically, it's something that is conveyed as scientific, but has unsubstantiated claims or unverified claims. I think when we look at astrology, though, I think there's enough to say that it does exist. I have had certain things happen in my, my particular chart. When I moved, Saturn was almost exactly right on my 7th house cusp, and when Saturn, transits or touches the 7th house cusp, in a lot of instances, people can experience restrictions in their relationships. And I haven't lost contact completely. They haven't been completely eradicated, but I know that the contacts are going to be diminished due to the fact that I have moved. Another thing is when, a very obvious thing when we get around, people that celebrate Christmas, when the sun enters Sagittarius, and like around November 23rd approximately, every year, people seem to get this jocular, jovial way about them. And people say, well, a lot of it's attributed to the holiday season coming. It's Thanksgiving's around, near that time or whatever. But, the sun is entering Sagittarius. And if you notice, when the sun enters Capricorn around December 22nd or 23rd of every year, even though it's right before Christmas, people get a little bit more despondent, or they're not really always despondent, but, more stern, serious outlook on things. They're they're very prudent maybe in what they're spending on their Christmas, presents and so forth and so on. And also, some other things, the studies, might vary, but there have been some studies that have basically, stated that there's, this one is according to i09.com, that there's more car accidents that occur on a full moon than any other day, according or is at least opposed to the new moon, 14% more frequently as opposed to the new moon on average. There is a lot of things, I think it's safe to say astrology, according to scientific study, they can make claims that it doesn't exist and might not be technically classified as a science. But I think there's enough to substantiate it, and there's enough to at least state that it can't conclusively be refuted or disproven. Some people are in a hurry to debunk or denounce astrology due to having superficial knowledge on the subject. It's like if somebody just goes, and looks at their, daily horoscope based on their sun sign, a lot of times that won't be accurate because there's so many other elements in their chart. With the other two main proponents, anyway, I think, are the moon sign and the rising sign. Somebody might have a completely different rising sign, and maybe that's why the daily horoscope is not always accurate for these people when they look it up. If they knew their rising sign and they looked at the daily horoscope for the rising sign, it might be more accurate. A couple different, two of the main ones, astrology, I guess you could say, methods are the Western and Vedic, and I've talked about that on a previous video. That Western deals with more theoretical positions of the planets, constellations, and the Vedic is more, scientific. I do also realize that, astrology has been used to help solve murder cases, find missing people. So it's obviously something where it is, it is used, for certain things, and it wouldn't be used to determine these things if it didn't have some validity to it. Another thing is when people talk about, the scientific studies on it are inconclusive, or it refutes the validity in astrology. I'll give you an example. Studies can be very subjective. Let's take a case where, hypothetically, somebody was studying people that had the sun in their 10th house in their natal chart. Now, people with the sun in the 10th house, according to astrology, might have a position of notoriety, some at least maybe moderate level of fame, or maybe position of authority, or like a management position, government, political position. Now let's say 100 people were surveyed that had this placement, and say only 10 of them fit that criteria. It'd be very easy to say, oh, see, we proved it doesn't work. Well, not necessarily, because the whole chart has to be taken into consideration. A number of people might have the sun in the 10th house, but have a preponderance of planets at the bottom of the horizon, thus making that person more introverted and might be less likely to be in a position, where they're showcased to the public, or of notoriety, or political position, authority, or something. So, when people say that, to me, tests are very subjective. You have to look at the whole chart as a whole and look at it extensively. There's so many elements of astrology, including, planets and signs, houses, aspects made to planets in the midheaven, the ascendant, even aspect, conjunctions to the houses from planets. There's decanates, dwads, there's nuances. There's so many different things. Transits could impact somebody, at a given point in time. So that's why those tests, I believe, are very subjective. Now, when people say, it's really, they can't prove it 100%, they can't. I don't think it's safe to say. It's safe to say that it can't be disproven. I've had a number of people guess my sun sign or rising sign for it to just be, because they were mediumistic or they were psychic. I'm not saying I'm not saying I don't believe in people being that, but the probability is that people were able to guess my sun and or rising sign based on, my appearance and how it corresponds with those signs. And there's just too many things that go on astrologically for me to just say, okay, I'm going to debunk this, I'm going to denounce it, I'm going to say that there's no validity to it. For me, it's one of those things, it's almost like, you see in some murder cases when someone's guilty, but you didn't have the irrefutable evidence to necessarily prove it. I think it's kind of similar with astrology. Most people that study this and are enamored with the subject, like me, do realize and are cognizant of the fact it does exist, but they're just not, you might not be able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And anyway, that's really what I wanted to, to get with people on, and it's just the simple fact that, I think there's enough evidence to say it does exist. And the people, the scientists out there that refute it and say it doesn't, well, they just, I think a lot of them, that's attributed to the fact that they have not studied the subject maybe as thoroughly as maybe they could have in order to really safely say that it isn't a science. So anyway, people, that will conclude this YouTube astrological segment for astrology and, at least in my opinion, its validity. And stay tuned next time, where I'll be continuing my house ruler segments. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel, but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis on a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone. Because a person astrologically is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.